So please give a warm welcome to our first speaker of the night, Erin Richardson.
Thank you. Also, these glasses, I got them at MCN 2024 in Lawrence, Kansas, because that's what MCN does to you. Do weird stuff. Okay. I'm a collection manager. I help organize and preserve humanity's creations for the indefinite future, and I've done this for almost 30 years. Museums often call these things permanent collections, but here's what I've learned. They are not permanent. They're not permanent because of the FBI Art Crimes Unit or repatriation. There's also deaccession, unattended children, yet we keep trying to achieve permanence because isn't that our job? But for me, that is not always my job. This is the story of how I came to be the museum person that will stand in opposition to long-term preservation or collecting things in the first place. Stuff gets into museum collections from contributors, normally donors, and there are lots of other routes, but I have 5 minutes. So people who work in fundraising know about donor intent, and often that is our main priority in collecting, honoring the intent of the person contributing this work to our collection. But I want to talk about creator intent. Frequently, the creator is dead by the time their work ends up in a museum. So the creator is not the donor. A collector probably acquired that work and then later donated it to the museum. The creator is not a party to this transaction. Sometime in the early 1990s, I learned that my grandmother had been keeping a daily diary since the 1960s or so. They were all lined up on a shelf in the guest room closet, and my uncle gave her a new blank journal every year for Christmas. Around that same time, Laurel Thatcher Ulrich won a raft of awards for A Midwife's Tale, a book about midwife Martha Ballard, who died in 1812. It was sourced from her diaries, and I had a fantasy about doing this with my grandmother's diaries. Now, fast forward to 2018. I am listening to a conference presentation from the Japanese American National Museum about 400 artworks made by formerly incarcerated Japanese Americans. And these works were rescued from the estate of Alan Hendershot Eden. He was an anthropologist and one of the first people to write about Japanese Americans that were incarcerated with humanity. And he visited abandoned camps and collected artwork that had been abandoned by the former residents. The presentation was about the process of identifying the creators and their descendants. Afterwards, I talked with a guy who had been in the session. He couldn't believe these people had left their work behind after they were freed, but I strongly identified with this whole idea. I wondered if perhaps the Japanese Americans had made art to prevent mental illness from imprisoning their minds the same way their bodies had been imprisoned by the government. I realized while talking to this guy that I also do that. I've lived with a chronic illness for 20 years, and when my body is exhausted but my brain is awake, I knit a lot. I've probably made hundreds of garments and accessories, and you might think I'd be wearing one of those right now, but I am not. Mostly the things that I make while sitting on the couch are given away or taken apart and remade into something else. Sometimes they go into the donation bin behind the Baptist church. The purpose of knitting for me is to stay sane. It's not to make clothing. I am not a fiber artist, but let's talk about artists for a minute. Artists are often prolific creators, and when a working artist dies, they have lots of stuff that they leave behind. Even artists know this is a problem. I've inventoried 2 artists' estates. The contents of working artist estates is often unsellable and ungiveawayable. It was usually their worst work, and some of it is truly horrible. This artist probably had no intention of it seeing the light of day. Other cultures are not into permanent preservation insanity. Indigenous cultures of the Northwest Coast create amazing totem poles. Some, like these, were stolen centuries ago and taken to European museums for preservation. Upon repatriation, museums might be appalled to learn that the tribal government will put these poles outside. Some of the poles are actually intended to return to the earth. Preserving them like a Western museum is the opposite of the creator's intention. My grandmother will be 98 in 3 weeks. She's reading her diaries and then tearing them up and putting them in the recycle bin. Apparently, that is her intention for her work, that they be destroyed. She's told me a few things about what she's read, and I don't want to know anymore. Should museum people like me or you get to preserve what another creator chose not to? How can you best honor the intentions of creators represented in your museum collection? You are also a creator. What have you created? What are your intentions for your work? Make them clear before some museum person finds it, gives it a number or a DOI or an NFT, and preserves it against your wishes.